Hi, it's very close to Christmas right now, and I always like to provide a free video from my school and also on YouTube. So that's what this is for. And this is going to be a cute little Santa overlooking this the area where the picture goes, and then his little belly goes on each side, and then his feet go down the bottom. Now, I am I am a traditional wood carver, trained in that sort of European decorative design. And so my problem with doing sort of whimsical little carvings like this is I always like to go more and more details and you know, make the facial features a little bit more clear and all of that. So I've got to hold back on this. I'm just going to try to make this a very simple project that people can do whether you've carved before or not. And I'm really going to try to do this with only two tools. I've got a V-chisel and then a flat chisel. Now, it's going to be interesting. I was kind of working through it and thinking, okay, there's going to be some tricky parts, but yeah, we'll see how this goes. So I am going to try to keep this so that if you haven't carved very much, that you can do this. And all you need to do is have some sharp tools, really good quality tools. You don't want to get anything really cheap because it'll just be frustrating. And so what I did was I bought this. This is pre-made. I got this at Michael's craft supply store, and this was already in there. All right. There is no glass frame. Usually when you buy pre-made frames like this, there's a glass and then there's a piece of wood behind it, but there isn't any for this one. No big deal. You can still, basically, that goes off there. Then you put the picture in there. And so you've got these little metal hooks that I bent back and to pull this off. And the reason I took this off is because I really didn't want to affect this or bump it or anything. So I can just, you know, freely go along the edge there and do the carving. Okay, so I'm just going to dive right in. Okay, so I've got this clamped down. Now I've got this fancy workbench with these bench dogs. Now this is large enough where if you didn't have bench dogs, you could just clamp this down to whatever workbench or table you're working on. It's far enough away from the carving where you can just put regular C-clamps there. So a lot of times I don't like to have C-clamps on my carving. Well, first of all, if you could end up damaging the wood, damaging the surface, then also it just gets in the way. So it's nice to have this style or this technique of holding. If you did want to clamp this and not damage the surface, what you would do is just take either a piece of cardboard or maybe a piece of cork or something, maybe a piece of leather just between the clamp and the wood, and that'll protect it from making marks in the wood. Okay, so now I mentioned I'm only going to be using two tools, the V-chisel and a flat chisel. But I'm going to start out with the V-chisel, and I'm just going to do a lot of outlining of the design. So now just a real quick one, if you haven't carved before, and this is really just, I like using these long handle gouges because you can hold onto them with both hands. All right. And I would really encourage you to try to do this and lead with the right or the left hand. All right. It's a good idea because I like to go back and forth just depending on where I'm going, what direction, what's happening with the grain. Now this piece of wood, it is basswood, and it's really the nicest wood to start out with. Now as I'm going right on the line, just taking that line away. And I'm going to go down maybe 1/8 of an inch, but you have to be careful because actually I probably shouldn't. I was looking at how thick this is, and this is probably, let me just check. Let's check. It's about 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, about 1/4 of an inch thick here. So I'm going to try to go about halfway down. I need to be careful not to go too far because you don't want to break through. Okay, so do you see what I'm doing? I've got this braced, this hand braced against the wood as I'm pushing it through and just kind of walking along. Now, a lot of these areas where it's got a tight curve, sometimes using a mallet helps to get around those corners. So now I'm just making a little bit of a wavy edge there. Okay, so all I'm doing right now is just going around the outside. All right, and then let's do the little nose. It's going to go over the edge, but that's okay. Kind of gives to the character. It adds to the character of him sort of looking over that edge. And then there's the edge of his face. Okay, and then there's little hands reaching around. Yeah, so these pre-made frames are really handy just to have that carving canvas already set, and you can do all sorts of designs around this. And it's funny, when I was designing this, I was figuring out what to do, and I had some Christmas ornaments there, just round Christmas ornaments, and then I had some candy canes there, and what is this? Oh yeah, some holly there, and I was just sort of throwing all this Christmas stuff in there. And so you can see this was an evolution of design. And how did I end up with Santa Claus peeking over? Or it might just be an elf, I don't know. But yeah, this is the evolution of design. And I quite often do draw right on the carving, design right on the carving, but when you're doing that, you want to use a erasable pencil, that's for sure, because there's a lot of changes that happen. And I really was trying to keep this as simple as possible, and so that if you haven't carved much, that this is something that can be really fun to do, and just a cute project. And yes, my biggest issue is knowing when to stop. I like to, do all these details. Okay, on the feet here, should we do, laces, and should we, all those details that you could end up doing. Okay, so I think I'm going to go and divide these up there. Okay, well, we got them outlined. Now, as I said, we're going to try to do this with just 2 chisels, the flat chisel and a V chisel. So I've got them outlined. And now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry about the background at all. The background is just going to stay plain. And what I'm going to do is take my V chisel and start to round over and just give a little bit of shape to this, to the surfaces. Now, I am going to be painting this also, so that's going to really sort of bring it out and bring out the details. But I'm going to take this flat chisel and just to start rounding it over, and this is, it's a good idea to watch the video on carving a donut because it'll help you understand grain direction and how to sort of round over surfaces. But I know it sounds like a really simple carving. It's actually a donut or bagel, whatever, if you don't like the sugar. But it's how to go over the top part. All right. Let me just grab that real quickly and I'll walk you through it. Okay, well, let me just explain real quickly. This is a crash course on the donut lesson. But if you look at this, so the grain is going in this direction, right? And when you're rounding over the top of the donut, you go in that direction and that direction. When you're rounding over the bottom, you go this direction and this direction. Okay, so otherwise, if you go in this direction, you actually cut into the grain and you go against the grain. So there's going to be a lot of that I'll be going over on this. Now, just to make things more confusing, the inside of the donut is reverse. To go the correct direction, you go in this direction on that quadrant right there, that direction, that direction, that direction. Okay, so I know it may seem like a simple design, but it is a really, really good lesson. And so I'm going to stick with that. All right, so we've got these rounding over this way. All right, so the grain is going in this direction. So let's say I'm going to do the belly here, start at the top. I'm going to go in that direction and that direction. So let's just go ahead and start that. So start right at that point, and I'm going to just take this flat chisel. Now you could, if you wanted to, and you didn't have a flat carving chisel, you could take just a regular bench chisel. Now it's a little bit more awkward, a little bit more clumsy. Sometimes the angle is a little awkward, but it can be done. But I would recommend getting something that is a carving chisel. You see, there's a little bit of a lightness, a little thinness to the blade. Okay, so just rounding that over from there to there and there to there, just to give it a little bit of extra shape. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing down here. So from there. Okay, and you see what I'm doing? I'm just taking just the edge, just to give it a little bit of a curve right at the edge. Doesn't have to go too far into that surface. One of the tricks to carving, making something deeper, making something very shallow carved like this, making it look deeper than it actually is just to round over just the outer edge a little bit more aggressively. Now, if there's any areas that get a little roughed up, you can always go back with a V-chisel and deepen it and clean up those lines. But you do want to be careful not to take this deeper than the thickness of the wood. Okay, so that's rounded over there, and it can go into that edge a little bit. And then I'm going to do the hands here. So same thing. Now, actually, notice what I'm doing. I've got this, this is a single bevel chisel. All right, there's a bevel on one side and it's flat on the other. And this is a small one. This is a 10 millimeter. You could use the standard one that I use is a 14 millimeter. You could use it, but you're only going to use a very small amount of it, small edge of it, maybe only a quarter of it. Do you see? So sometimes it's better just to have a smaller one so it's not such a large tool. But you could do everything here with the 14 millimeter flat chisel. You could do anything. You can have a really large flat chisel. You're only using a tiny one, but it's always better to have one that's a little bit more closer to what you're, the size that you're needing to carve. But a lot of flexibility in this. So you want to start at the top right there, go that direction, and then there's that point right there. Go from there in that direction, and then you're going to stop right there. So let me just show you how that goes. So again, this is like a little tiny outside of the donut. So you're going to go in that direction, and then back and finish that up right there. Okay, so if it starts getting confusing, I really do recommend that you go through that donut carving lesson. Really, really helps. Now that is actually part of the free videos of my school. Okay, so just round that. So just a little bit of a pillow look. Okay, so then on this side also, from there to there. So just doing the simple round areas first, and then coming in this direction. So now, I was mentioning, got distracted. I was mentioning the bevel, all right? So we've got bevel side on one side and flat on the other. I'm doing most of my cuts like this with the bevel side down, all right? Not this way, because what happens is if you do the flat side against the wood rather than the bevel side, it actually forces you to get a little closer to the wood. It's a little bit more awkward, and it also wants to dive. It wants to go really deep. So you want to do this, and then also it allows you to lift it off the wood just a little bit, okay? If the bevel is against the wood, it allows you to lift it a little higher, and it doesn't really want to dive into the wood and go too deep. So do most of that rounding just, and because it's a flat chisel, you're going to be taking a few flat cuts and eventually creating a round. So let me just show you what I'm doing. So let's just say you've got an edge like this, all right, and you want to make this round. You take one cut straight, and then maybe a couple other ones, and eventually this edge will be curved. It won't happen the first time, so you may have to take several cuts to do it, but that's basically how you end up rounding with a flat chisel. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. Now this should look like it's going underneath this little area, the little rim of the hat. So let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, and that just a little bit of a step down there. Nothing too fancy. And then I'm going to take this and round this, the rim of the hat. And so you're going to find the high spot and find the high spot there. And I'm going to go in this direction and this direction. Okay, so just again, round over. And then stop before it start going in the other direction. Now this one, I'm going to go from here to there and stop right there. Okay, so a lot of the grain direction can get very confusing, but sometimes you just have to listen to the wood and see if it starts feeling like something is happening that doesn't make sense, it's too hard to cut, it's maybe splitting the wood out, then try going in the other direction. Because this is probably one of the most difficult things to really get to understand is grain direction. Okay, and then from there to there. Now, let me just show you this. This is kind of an odd shape. So when you think about, when you're referring to the donut, it's basically this. So this hat is basically this side of the donut. Okay, so if you look at the top from there to there, there to there, there to there, there to there. And then this side is that direction and that direction. Okay, follow those arrows. So this side starting right there, that direction, that direction. Okay, so you can use that donut, the donut map. Now with basswood, you probably will be able to get away with some of the going in the wrong direction just because it's so soft. And if you have a really sharp tool, also you could get away with that. But it's always best to just kind of stick with that plan. Okay, now here's another circle. We've got start from there to there, go from there to there, there to there, there to there, there to there. Okay, so same thing, but I'm only dealing with the inside of those V-cuts. Okay, I'm not doing anything with the background, anything. I'm only carving the actual details themselves. So all of this background, basically the edge of that V-cut is going to be the end of the design. Now, if you wanted to, you could lower this down a little bit, you know, in the background. It's a technique that I use quite often in a sort of angling down around the design, just to make it look like it's lifted out. But we can get away with this and just round it right down to that V-cut, and then that's it. That's the end of that design. And I think that's going to work okay for this. Okay, so now here I'm going to take this and round this all the way to about there. All right, again, I'm looking at that point where it, the quadrant of that, the edge of that circle, where it switches, because if I would continue coming back in that direction, I'd start to go against the grain over here. Okay, then go back that direction. Now I'm going to come in this direction, finish up this guy here, and back down here. Okay, so you see it's not very deep at all. There's one other little thing I want to do here with some detail, and I'm going to do a little bit of a kind of an overlap right there and then let it fade off. So it looks like that's kind of overlapping the rest of the hat, little fold in it. Okay, then there's the little fuzzy ball on the end, so very similar to his nose, from there to there. All right, find the quadrants, all right, and then go that direction, that direction, that direction, that direction. Okay, it's like a little mini donut. No, that's more like the donut hole. The mini donut hole. Okay, you see now I've pretty much been able to do most of this, actually all of this shaping with this flat chisel. And again, if you get anywhere where the flat chisel maybe wants to dig into the corners, you can always go back around with the V-chisel and do some cleanup. Now these tighter areas, the V-chisel is going to be a little bit more challenging to get nice and clean. So do it as close as you can. These really tight curves, sometimes it's hard to get around corners. Okay, so you know what's nice about this design, where his little hat is going over his eyes? I don't have to carve eyes. Okay, this is the plan. All right, now I'm going to go back to this area, and now I need to be careful with this. I'm going to make a V-chisel just to mark the little belt edge. But as I go off the edge like that, I could break that out. So it's probably a good idea to come from here, from the outer edge in. So I'm going to go do this one. Just a little bit of a curve to show some dimension. So it looks like it's this whole area is just a big ball. Now this area, I really suggest you do not cut towards yourself. So this part here, there's a temptation of going like that, or maybe like that. Stop, rotate it, and turn around and make the cut in this direction. So much safer. Okay. And I'm just going to rotate it back so we don't lose track of what we're doing. Okay, I just do not like pointing the tool towards myself at all. Okay, so now let's work on the feet. And so we're just going to do the upper edge of that, and then come here. Again, every cut so far, I've used this with the bevel of the tool down against the wood. All right, now I'm going to do another little thing with the V-chisel. I'm going to extend that cut a little bit into there, kind of give it, make it look like there's the shoe is a little bit in front. Okay, so I'm trying to get the shadow to really show up. Now, the thing that's going to make this pop, the thing that's really going to make this show up is paint. All right, this is one of those things. It's very shallow, and it is Christmas, so you might as well put some color in it. And so I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to show you real quickly how I'm not going to show you the whole process because it's just going to take too long, but I will explain how. I'm going to be sealing this with shellac. I'll be putting 2 coats of brushed on shellac, and that is going to stop the paint from kind of soaking into the wood. I can just do it across the surface, and if I want to, if I want to wipe it off, I can do that. And then what you can do is you can do some either very light watered down acrylic and just make a hint of a color, or you can really make it bold and make so that you don't see any of the wood at all. It's really up to you. And you can take this same design that I've done. You can do a little bit more details. Maybe, do some wrinkles. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and do that. See, this is my problem. I just can't stop. I'm just gonna keep going. So, like in the hat where there's a little bit of maybe wrinkles, or maybe across there, you can do some surface just to show texture. Doesn't have to be a lot. And let's see what else. Maybe across here. Something like that. Okay, so this is where you just need to know when to stop and how far. You can even do little finger, little V cuts in the fingers. Right, so that actually looks like fingers. And don't cut towards yourself. Actually was stepped away from the carving. And then you can do little, anyway, so I'm going to, oops, hold on. One thing I forgot. This is also needs to be rounded over. Okay, now I also wanted to mention, as we're doing this, if you wanted to make the transition between the carved area and the surface a little bit smoother, just take some very, very light sandpaper, maybe 300 grit, something like that, and you can just go across the surface. Now, I generally don't like to sand because it's a very dusty mess, but if you want to make that transition, sometimes that flat plain surface right next to a carved edge like that, it's a little bit too obvious, or it shows up too much. So maybe just go right along the edges. Just be aware that by sanding this, you could end up losing any of the real fine definition. But this is, there's not a lot of those really, really fine details on this. So like any corners like this or this, just kind of soften that. Maybe this area here. And again, since it's going to be painted, you can actually get away with a lot more if it's going to be painted. I would not recommend painting any other wood other than basswood. So basswood is kind of a boring color wood. It's really, there's not a lot of interesting grain. So if you are going to end up painting it, I would really recommend sticking with basswood to do that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put 2 coats of shellac on it. And then I'm going to be painting it. I haven't decided what colors, but I'm going to be, making Santa stand out a little bit more bold than this. Okay, so I spent some time to paint this, and I figured, you know what, in order to make this really stand out, to make it very bold colors. So no, none of the sort of lightening it to try to make the grain show through. So what I would do if I wanted to do that is just mix the acrylic paint with water, and then it's just more of kind of a stain, a colored stain than anything. So if you look at what I did was, and I just used very simple, basic acrylic paints, craft paints, and small paint brushes, and just I put them in a little cup and painted the details. So It's just determining, so really just 3. We've got white, red, and black. Now, I could end up painting the background, or you know what? They've got all sorts of fancy things now. They can have sort of gold speckled paint. You can put the whole background as gold speckled, or you can even do maybe a frame, paint the edges green, just to, you know, bring another Christmas color into it. I mean, there's so many things you can do. Just experiment around with it. As I said, I am a traditional wood carver, so this is kind of a foreign world to me. The craft world. But you know what? This is just a fun little project you can do in an afternoon, really. At least carve it and then maybe the next day paint it. And really, really minimal amount of tools. And so I want to just show you what I did. So again, I used this shellac. This is just something you can get at a regular hardware store. And I got clear. If you get something that's called amber, it's going to have a little bit more of a yellow color to it. So if you wanted to do that, it would tone this down a little bit. It wouldn't be so white. So I just put 1 coat of that on. Didn't worry about thinning it down or anything like that. Just put 1 coat of shellac on it. And I just used a regular, just cheap brush. You can use any kind of brush, really. Brush it on. Now, it's a good idea to do the whole surface, because what happens is if you only do the front, then the back is not sealed, and it could end up twisting and warping as moisture can still get in from the back and not the front. So it may end up doing a little bit of warping. So make sure you're sealing the whole edge. Now, I didn't really do the bark because sometimes that actually changes the effect of the bark. It kind of shines it up a bit. And if you want that effect, that's fine. But I didn't do it on this one. Okay, so 1 coat of shellac. You can do 2 coats also, just to really make sure that the grain is nice and sealed. And the main reason I do that is because it's a lot easier to paint over a sealed surface than just over bare wood. And also, if you ever really mess up and you want to clean off some of that acrylic paint, just use water, a cloth, maybe a water and a brush, and it'll, it's a little easier. It's not perfect, but it's easier to clean up if you just, you know, accidentally make the brush go across the whole surface. It's a little easier to clean off the acrylic if you've got a sealed surface. Okay, so I've got, so I painted that white. Okay, so let's go back. A coat of the shellac, and then I just painted across the surface. Now I haven't done this because I'm still kind of letting it dry, but what you can do then is take this, and this is the same product, only in a spray, and you can just make sure you shake it up, and then you can coat, do 1 or 2 coats across the surface, and that kind of shines it up a little bit. It doesn't actually seal it as well as this. Okay, so you could use this just to initially do the sealing of it, but I've always found that it doesn't really do the full sealing as well as I would like. So I like to do the brush on first, and then that final sealing the surface, sealing the paint into it, do it with spray shellac. And again, you can, at this point, the back is pretty sealed, so it doesn't matter whether you do the back with the spray or not, but just shines that up a bit. And then if you want to do it even more, you can put this paste wax. And this is just, it's like shoe polish, really, that same product, just not colored. Take a cloth, rub it on, and then about 15-20 minutes later, you buff it, and it really brings this nice sheen to it. So I'll probably end up doing this. Now, what I did, just so you can see what this looks like with an actual photo in, I found a photograph from my husband's and my wedding over 20 years ago. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary this year. So I wanted to show you. So these 2 little notches here, 2 little pieces of metal, that was what held everything in originally. Okay, so let me just show you what I had here. This was all that was there. Okay, just a piece of wood. Now, I took this out of another frame, and actually the little piece of glass, I mentioned there wasn't glass on this one. The piece of glass that was out of the other frame fits. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that. And let me just put the picture in there like that. All right. So picture in there like that. So we've got glass, the picture, and then the wood behind it. And make sure it's right side up. Yes, we don't want to do that. And then set that in like so. Make sure all of that sets into, ooh, doesn't work. It's a little tight. Okay, there we go. That, and then just take a little screwdriver and push those over. And push those over like that. And it can go a little bit more aggressively. I just don't want to hold it because I want to, but that would be folded flat to really secure that. And there it is. Whoops, got some dirt all over it. It's very, very cute. I'm not sure what my husband's going to think about our wedding picture in this, but you know, it's fun. All right. Well, you know, you can do so much with this. You can continue carving frames or even just painting a frame. You can paint the background. So many things you can do with it. If you wanted to antique it, you put a stain across the surface and then just wipe off that stain, and then the dark areas settle into the deeper areas of the carving. So many possibilities. So many possibilities, but that was a lot of fun. So experiment, have fun, and Merry Christmas and happy carving.